Welcome back to Tales of the Sealy Host. Except we have one problem, folks. I can't be doing that. I've run out of monsters. Yep, plain run out. So, I haven't run out of monsters as such as I've run out of details of the monsters. So what I'm going to do instead for you is move on to ghost stories. Now, what I'm going to tell you is the story of the choking ghost of the house near Sandyford Place in Glasgow. I see, the last time I was passing through Glasgow, I put up for a night at a hotel near Sandyford Place. I met an old friend of mine, Haley Brown. I hadn't seen him for a while, been a few years. And we had a lot to discuss, how we used to get on, friends, family, such like. Aye. We spent the whole of one evening debating away at things in the smoke room, where you also but I didn't smoke, but he did, so I joined him. This is back in the days before the smoking ban. And whilst the following night we went to an entertainment given by a charming reciter and raconteur, who, apart from her talent, and she was in the first rank of her profession, as far as I'm concerned, is a professor of extraordinary personal attractions, not least remarkable of which are her hands. Indeed, as my attention had been called to her that I'm indirectly indebted to the story. Miss North had typically psychic hands, apparently, exquisitely white and narrow in her long tapering fingers and filbert nails are the most perfect I've ever seen. I'm eluding them on the way back to the hotel after her performance, when Healy interrupted me. Talking about psychic things, Angus, he said, do you know there is a haunted house near where we are staying? You don't? Very well then, if I tell you what I know, and you write about it, well, you promise not to allude to the house by its right number. If you do, there'll be dickens to pay. Simply call it House Near the Sandyford Place. You promise? Good. Let us take a little stroll before we turn in. I feel I want a breath of fresh air, and I'll tell you an experience I once had there. It was exactly 2 years ago, and I was on tour there in the Green Bushes. All the usual theatrical diggings had been snapped up long before I had arrived, and not knowing where else to go, I went to Sandyford Place, which I saw advertised in one of the local papers as a first-class private hotel with very moderate charges. I went a bit of extravagance, but then one does not do foolish things sometimes, and to tell the truth, I wanted to change badly. I digged for a long time with a fellow man named Charlie Grosvenor. Not at all a bad chap, but rather apt to get on one's nerves after a while, but he had got on mine horribly. Consequently, I'm not all that sorry for an excuse to get away from him for a bit, even though I'd paid dearly for it. A private hotel in a neighbourhood like that of Sandyford Place is a big order for an ordinary comedian. Helly was a comedian, by the way. I forgot exactly what the terms were, but I know how I pulled that rather long face when I was told. Still being, as I say, tired of the usual digs, I determined to try it, and accordingly I found myself landed in a nice-sized bedroom on the second floor. The first 3 nights passed, nothing happened, nothing at all, know how it goes. And saving that, I had the most diabolical nightmare. A very unusual thing for me. It was the cheese, I said to myself when I got out of bed the next morning. I'll take very good care I don't touch cheese tonight. I kept this resolution, but I had the nightmare again, and even if anything it was worse than before. Then I fancied it must be the cocoa, and I was at the time a teetotaler, so I took hot milk instead. But I had a nightmare all the same, and my dreams terrified me to such an extent that I did not dare get out of bed in the morning. It was then winter, till it was broad daylight. It was now becoming a serious matter with me. As you know, a comedian and an actor, more than most people, need sleep, and it soon became as much as I could do to maintain my usual standard of acting. On the 4th night, determined to get rest at all costs, I took a stiff glass of hot brandy just before getting into bed. I slept. I could scarcely help sleeping, but not for long, for I was rudely awakened from my slumbers by a loud crash. I sat up in bed, thinking the whole house was falling about my ears. The sound was not repeated, and all was profoundly silent. Wondering what on earth the noise could have been, and feeling very thirsty. I got out of bed to get a drink of lime juice. To my annoyance, however, although I groped about everywhere, knocking an ashtray off the mantelpiece and smashing the lid of the soap dish, I could find neither lime juice nor matches. At length, giving up as a bad job, I decided to get back into bed again. With that end in view, I groped my way through the darkness, steering myself by the furniture, the position of which was, of course, quite familiar to me, or at least imagined it was. Judge then of my astonishment when I could not find the bed. At first I regarded it as a huge joke and laughed. "How rich! Ha ha ha! Fancy not being able to find one's way back to bed in a room of this dimension. Good enough for Punch. Too good, perhaps new." Ha ha ha. But it soon grew past a joke. I'd been completely around the room twice, and still no bed. I became seriously alarmed. Could I be ill? Was I going mad? But no. My forehead was cool and my pulse normal. For some seconds I stood still, not knowing what else to do. Then, to make one more desperate attempt, I stuck straight in front of me and ran into something that recoiled and hit me. Thrilled with amazement, I put my hand up to feel it was, and touched a noose. "A noose!" I ejaculated, interrupting Helly Brune for the first time since he began. "Aye, a noose," he repeated, suspended in mid-air. As you can imagine, I was greatly astonished, for I knew that there'd been nothing that I could be now mistaken for a noose in the night before in the room. I stretched out my arms to feel what it was fastened, but to my surprise the cord terminated in thin air. Then I grew frightened, and dropping my arms tried to move away from the spot I could not. My feet were glued to the flare. With a gentle purring sound the noose commenced fawning, and I use that word because the action was so intensely bestial, so like that of the cat or a snake around my neck and face. It then rose above me and then, circling furiously around and around and creating a miniature maelstrom in the air, descended gradually over my head. Lower and lower it stole, like some sleek caressing slug. Now past the tips of my ears, now my nose, now my chin, until with a tiny thud it landed on my shoulders. When with a fierce snap it suddenly tightened. I endeavoured to tear it off, but every time I raised my hand a strong magnetic force drew them to my side again. I opened my mouth to shriek for help, and an icy current of air froze the breath in my lungs. I was helpless. Angus. Utterly, wholly helpless. Cold, clammy hands tore my feet from the flare. I was hoisted bodily up and then let drop. A frightful pain shot through me. 100 wires cut into my throat at once. I gasped, choked, suffocated, and in my mad efforts to find a foothold, kicked out frantically in all directions. But this only resulted in increasing my torments. Since with every plunge the noose grew tauter, my agony at last grew unbearable. I could feel the sides of my raw, palpitating thorax writhing into one another, while every attempt to heave up breath from my bursting lungs was rewarded with the most excruciating paroxysms of pain more acute than I thought it possible for any human being to endure. My head became 10 times its natural size. Blood foaming, boiling blood poured into it from God knows where, and under its pressure my eyes bulged in their sockets and the veins in my nose cracked. Terrific thunderings echoed and re-echoed in my ears. My tongue, huge as a mountain, shot against my teeth. A sea of fire raced through my brain, and then blackness inconceivable. When I recovered consciousness, Angus, I found myself standing, cold and shivering, but otherwise sound and whole in the chilly oilcloth. I had now no difficulty in finding my way back to bed, and in about an hour's time succeeded in falling asleep. I slept till late, and on getting up tried to persuade myself that the horrible experience was that. Just a horrible experience, another nightmare. Now, as you may guess, after all this, I did not look forward to bedtime, and counted the minutes as they flew by with utmost regret. Never had I been so sorry when my performance at the theatre was over, and the lights of my hotel once again hove in sight. I entered my bedroom in fear and trembling, and so was apprehensive lest I should be again compelled to undergo the sensations of hanging that I decided to keep a light burning all night, and for that reason had bought half a pound of wax candles. At last I grew so sleepy that I could keep awake no longer, and placing the candlestick on a chair by the bed, I scrambled in between the sheets. Without as much as a sip of spirits, I slept like a top. When I awoke, the room was in pitch darkness. A curious smell at once attracted my notice, I thought, at first. It might be the passing illusion in a dream, but no, I sniffed again. It was there close to me, under my very nose, the strong, pungent odour of drugs. But not being a professor of smells, not even a humble student of physics, I consequently unable to diagnose it, and could only arrive at the general conclusion that it was a smell that brought with it very vivid recollections of a chemist's shop and of my old school lab. Wondering whence it originated, I thrust my face forward with the intentions of trying to locate it, when to my horror, my lips touched against something cold and flabby. In agony of fear, I reeled away, and the bed being narrow, I slipped over the edge and bumped onto the flare. Now, I think it's quite possible at this point you may have attributed my unhappy experience to more nor less than a bad dream. But your dream theory can no longer hold good, for on coming in such contact to the floor, I gave my funny bone a knock, which, I can assure you, made me thoroughly awake. And the first thing I noticed on receiving my scattered senses was the smell. I sat up and saw to my terror my bed was occupied, but occupied in the most alarming manner. On the middle of the pillow was a face, the face off. I looked closer and closer. I would have given every penny I possessed not to have done so, but I could not help myself. I looked closer, and it was the face of my brother Ralph, who you may recollect my mentioning to you, for he was the only one of us who was at the time making money whom I believed to be in New York. He'd always been rather sallow, but apart from the fact that he now looked very yellow, his appearance was quite natural. Indeed, as I gazed at him, I grew so convinced it was he that I cried out, "Ralph!" The moment I did so, there was a ghastly change. His eyelids opened, and his eyes I recognised at once protruded to such a degree that they almost rolled out. His mouth flew open, his tongue swelled, the whole countenance became convulsed with almost unparalleled, and for that reason indescribable, expression of agony, while the yellowness of his complexion dipped into such a livid, lurid black that it was so inconceivably repellent and hellish that I sprang away from the bed appalled. There was then a gasping, rasping noise in a voice that, despite its unnatural hollowness, I identified as that of Ralph. Broke forth. "I have been wanting to speak to you for ages, but something I cannot explain has always prevented me. I have been dead a month, not cancer, not Dolly, but poison. Goodbye, Helly. I shall rest in peace now." The voice stopped. There was a rush of cold air laden with the scent of the drug, and faintly tainted with the nauseating smell of the grave. And the face on the pillow vanished. How I got through the remainder of the night I cannot say. I dare not think. I dare only remember that I did not sleep. I was devoted to Ralph, and for that he had perished in a miserable manner suggested by apparition, completely prostrated in front of me. In the morning I received a black-edged letter from my mother, saying that she had just heard from Dolly, my brother's wife, saying Ralph had died from cancer in the throat. Dolly added that in postscript that her dearly beloved Ralph had been very good to her, and left her well provided for. Of course, we might have had the body exhumed, but we are poor, and Ralph's widow was rich. In America, you know, everything goes in favour of the dollars. Hence, we were obliged to let the matter drop, sincerely trusting Dolly would never take it into her head to visit us. She never did. My mother died last year. I felt her death terribly anxious, and so I no longer have any fixed abode, but I'm always touring British provinces. There is not much after Ralph's murderess. Much fear of Ralph's murderess and I meeting. It is rather odd, however, that after my own experience at the hotel, I heard that it had borne the reputation for being haunted for many years. A good many a visitor had passed the night in one of the rooms, presumably mine, had complained of hearing strange noises and having dreadful dreams. How can one explain it all? One can't, I responded, as we turned in for the night. Enjoy yourself tonight when you go to bed, people. Be careful not to hang.